I don't think that we're chasing after happiness. I think that we are instead searching after meaning. Hello and welcome back to the second part of our talk on the hollowness of happiness. If you haven't already watched the first video, go ahead and click the link that's gonna pop up on one of these sides. I don't know. Oh, there it is. Click that, go ahead and watch it, but make sure you come back here so you can continue the conversation. All right, let's get to it. So there I was. I sat down at my computer with an iron will, convinced that I was going to bang out my passionate and rational response to the happiness conundrum with ease. I placed my burning fingers on the hot keys of justice and nothing. Turns out coming up with a response was a little bit more difficult than I thought it was gonna be. And I was then reminded of two things. The first was that this is a very difficult topic to grapple with because meaning encompasses so many loaded concepts, and it also has significant implications for reality itself should we choose to accept it. And the second was the bitter reality that it's always easier to critique a viewpoint and it's always substantially more difficult to support and defend one. So after having my pride beaten out of me, I went back to the drawing board with my newfound humility and reformulated some ideas as to why we should be pursuing meaning over happiness. Let's see if this works! So tackling the topic of meaning is in no way an easy thing to do. So I think the best way to go about it is to start explaining what I mean when I say meaning. Meaning? Okay, so when I say meaning, what I'm suggesting is that there's actually ultimate purpose to our universe. And then our searching for meaning would be looking for what that actually is. Now we could dive even further and look into personal meaning, and we will do just a little bit of that. But for the sake of this discussion, let's keep it as broad as possible. So now with that established, let's move on to the first point. So this first statement may feel like it's a little bit of an oddball answer, but trust me, it's a necessary step we have to take. So here it is. My first reason for searching after meaning instead of happiness is because meaning is actually the harbinger of rationale. For example, by saying we should seek after meaning, we are provided with the rationale as to why we would even discuss the topic in the first place. In a way, it's a bit of a self-evident concept. We are saying that our question has purpose because we believe that there's actually a meaningful answer to be found. If we instead believed that life was completely meaningless, we would have no rationale to go looking for an answer at all. Allow me to simplify it even more. If I asked you to go get me my scissors out of my drawer, but they weren't actually there would be no rationale for me to ask you to do that task. It would be meaningless because there would be no scissors to be found. But if the scissors were there, then it would be a worthwhile search. Now this is where the idea of meaning having rationality becomes very, very beautiful. Not only does meaning begin to provide meaning for our own existence, it then provides rational basis for greater concepts such as love, dignity, and relationship. Let me show you how. If we can agree that life has meaning, it would then logically follow that humans have meaning as well. When we begin to see that we ourselves are meaningful, it then kind of pulls us out of our own selves and we're able to look at other people in our societal realm and rationally give these people meaning as well. People can then both consciously and subconsciously begin to bestow dignity on one another, which then leads us to be able to express love through relationships with one another. Isn't that cool? Now I acknowledge that this isn't always how it works, but I would say from my viewpoint as a therapist, I use this concept all the time, especially when someone's dealing with forgiveness issues. The concept of meaning helps us humanize another person and allows us to see the perpetrator as another human being. I just think that's so cool. Okay, but enough of the cool. Now on to the next one. So my second reason for choosing meaning over happiness is because it helps us deal with adversity, suffering, and death, something that happiness could never dream of doing. Following the line of thought discussed earlier, if we see our lives as meaningful, we can then say all areas, both good and bad, are also meaningful. So let's think about the example of marriage again. You go ahead, you get married, it's wonderful and beautiful, and everything goes off without a hitch. But then, sometime after the honeymoon period, something happens and the relationship is fractured. If you remember what we saw with happiness, the person could just walk out on the relationship because it was all about the me, me, me. But this is not the case for someone who searches out meaning. They're gonna look deeper at the value of themselves and their partner, and this makes them consider the feelings of the other side. Then instead of just folding because of lack of happiness, the couple can fight through the adversity because they see the deeper meaning of the commitment that they made to each other. And I see this all the time as a therapist. When two people come together and they're willing to slug it out, they almost always find reconnection and deeper connection on the other side. But don't just take it from me. Let's examine an extreme example, one found in the hellish environment of the World War II Nazi concentration camps. In case you haven't already guessed, the person that I'm going to pull from is a man named Viktor Frankl. Victor was a Jewish psychiatrist that that was imprisoned in several concentration camps, including Auschwitz. He miraculously survived, and when he gained his freedom, he penned his most famous work, Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't already read it, you're missing out on some of the deepest insights ever written on paper. Go read it. Now, whether you have or have not read it, I'll tell you this. What I found so interesting is that nowhere in there did he ever say anything about happiness being a guiding principle or something that sustained him or any other prisoners in their time as hostages. Instead, he stated, the man who was able to survive was the one who was able to cultivate meaning in the moment and also cultivate it for the future. This is an amazing statement because what we see then is that even in the worst of environments, meaning can shine like a bright light in the darkness. Victor was also quoted saying that because he had meaning, the hellish experiences that he went through were actually deeply formative for him. In so many ways, it feels counterintuitive because as humans, we want to avoid suffering. But what Victor's saying, what historical figures are saying, and what I see in my own therapy is that someone who cultivates meaning actually can use suffering for the betterment of their own self. Allow me to read this quote from him that will sum up this second point very well. There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is meaning to one's life. And now we've arrived at our third and final point. And I'll admit, this last one is strictly observational, but I think it's still very important. Let's just think about this. For centuries, we've had the greatest of minds debating and agonizing in deep thought over the human condition and what it entails. So riddle me this. If the answer to life's deepest questions and longings was happiness, why didn't some of our greatest thinkers such as Plato, Aristotle, or Socrates ever come to this final conclusion? I mean, they talked about happiness, but they would never say that it was our final guiding principle. Or what about famous religious leaders such as Gandhi, Jesus, or the Buddha? None of them came to the final conclusion that happiness was what life was all about. And instead, they all gave rigorous discourses on the importance and meaning of suffering. So if the majority of the world's most brilliant minds wrestled with meaning in existence over happiness, how could I or anyone else say that they have more wisdom than these great minds combined? How arrogant! Okay, let's just sum these two videos up. A life spent searching after happiness not only creates a person who lacks depth and character, but almost always leads to emptiness and meaninglessness. But a life spent cultivating meaning is one that produces people that can face the challenges of this world and not only withstand them, thrive in them. Goodness, I could dedicate my entire channel to this topic and still never get to the bottom of it. But I have to pump the brakes for now because I have to stop somewhere. But let's not stop the conversation here. Let's talk more. If you're someone that doesn't normally comment, I want to encourage you to go ahead and join in. My whole purpose for changing my channel around was to help people engage their own thoughts. And one of the best ways to do this is by interacting with other people and hearing what they have to say. Remember, what you say is meaningful because you have meaning. And if this video was at all helpful for you, would you consider liking, subscribing, and hitting that little notification button? I have so much more planned and I really want you to continue to be part of the conversation. Next week will be a bit of a shift in topic, but it'll be equally interesting, so make sure you come back to hear that one. Well, that's all I have for today, so until next week, keep thinking.